on to a Q&A. So we'd like to ask the speakers to come find a seat.
All of your work focuses on animals in some regard or another. And as I was preparing for this, I found a really interesting study from 2013 of more than 3,500 birders and gardeners in North America. And it found that when climate change was framed as a threat to humans, it did not increase the respondents' interest in personally taking action on climate change. But when it was framed as a danger to birds, it did. So I'd be curious to hear from any or all of you, we can just kind of go popcorn style, what insights you have gained from your work into why it might be easier for people to show care and concern for the impacts of climate change on animals rather than on people. Oh, it means you guys figure it out yourselves. Like popcorn in a pan, popping. Let's start with Madeleine. She leaned forward.
Yeah, I think the first thing to look at there is the group that they surveyed. Birders are, I took ornithology in college, and I think birders can be sometimes a kind of single-minded and obsessive group of people. I love bird watching, for the record, and I hope maybe if we surveyed a different group, we would get a different result. But I think unfortunately it can be really easy to other people and also animals sometimes that seem really alien to you, that maybe have a really different background, different culture. And I think it's important to check your internal biases of when you're having difficulty relating to people that maybe you don't have a lot in common with. And if you're able to move past that and find more empathy, I think that would help a lot.
That's such a good point. And that crossed my mind too. Like, I say this with all love for birders. I married into a birding family. The birders are a little bit nuts. And I'm a little nuts too, right? I'm kind of nuts for octopuses. I've been obsessed with them for like 3 decades. And I think that like, this is just, it's maybe unfortunate, but it's just a very human thing. Like, we all have not only biases, but preferences. You know, we feel more connected to some people than others ever since we were in school and just made friends with some kids and had a harder time making friends with others. And we all have different animals that we're totally obsessed with. And I feel like the key here is that we do show concern and we take action when something like climate change affects something that we care about. And ideally, we would care for all of the life on the planet, right? And all of the other humans and all of the other life. And I think we can be working on getting there. Like, we can kind of be struggling and reaching for that saintly level of all-encompassing empathy. And on the way, I think there's no shame in finding what connects with us. So if it is birds that really work for somebody to get them to take action, to get them to care, like, that's great. That can start to expand our empathy. And if it's octopuses for some of us, that could also start. And if we keep stretching from there, I just feel like it's cool. In a way, climate change is cool because it literally affects everything on the planet. And so if everybody can find at least one thing they care about on the planet, then they're going to care about climate change.
I think there could be a bit of an assumption too that humans are able to adapt around climate change, whereas animals cannot. I was thinking about the most interesting animal for a long time, and tardigrades can adapt to very extreme environments. Humans cannot. In fact, a lot of humans that are affected currently and will be affected in the future by climate change are from backgrounds that they don't have the expenses, they don't have the economy, they don't have the means to move or adapt that way. So I think there's a bit of an idea on humans' part that, oh, climate change, animals cannot adapt to that. We'll be fine though. You know, we can make shelter, we can, especially in the US. So yeah, I would say a bit of that point.
Yeah, I think that all was great, and I just wanted to add one thing where I think sometimes when it comes to people, it can just, the empathy and emotion can be overwhelming, and so it's kind of nice to focus on something else. And we can focus on these other beings that are seemingly more helpless, kind of like what to speak to what you were saying, but at the same time, I think sometimes people are often quick to blame, like, oh, well, there are these folks who are being affected by climate change, but like they just shouldn't live there. Kind of like what Lindsey was saying, like, why would you live here? But some people don't have as many options as others, and so I think it is a mix of a lot of things, that from overwhelm to just maybe not fully understanding, but then also there are these animals that we know it's our fault. Like, so we should do something for them because this is all our fault. But there's a lot more happening, obviously. So just wanted to add that.
All right. As we have all talked about today, I think we all believe that empathy can be an effective driver of action and change. Once you care about something, once you understand it, you're more motivated to do something about it. Hope is often cited as another. If you don't have hope for a situation, it's hard to take action on it. So I'd be curious to hear any of your thoughts about a connection between the two.
I can kick this one off. So I think a lot about hope as kind of a goal. I've been really deep into this like Sapolsky book about human behavioral biology, but having a goal gives you like a dopamine drive to like work towards something, and action requires that sort of benefit. If you aren't seeing the benefit of what you're doing, you're going to be less motivated to do it. And I think hope actually is necessary in order to motivate that action, because if you don't see like the positive effects that you're working towards in anticipation of that goal, then you're not going to be motivated to do it. You're going to be motivated to do whatever is going to give you an incremental benefit or like protect you from the worst case scenario, which is what dominates in the absence of hope. So I don't know if it's is there hope? Maybe, but like, as a practical necessity, you have to act like there is.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for holding the space for hope, Sam. Okay, sort of on the other side of that coin, I think the climate crisis can feel impersonal, overwhelming, and frightening or depressing to many people, probably including all of us at various times, even though we work on it. And that can lead people to shut down or disengage from thinking about it or acting on it. I have seen in my own profession, I don't know about in yours, but in recent years, a lot of debate over how much do we focus on that versus how much do we focus on solutions and telling positive stories, maybe at the expense of those more scary or negative stories. And I would be curious to hear your thoughts on what is our responsibility as artists and scientists and documentarians in regards to those difficult feelings. Is it helpful to convey the enormity and severity of the crisis? Or would we be more effective if we focus on solutions and positive stories? Or perhaps find some middle ground?
Personally speaking, I am one of those people that gets very caught up in anything negative, any negative news, and it can feel very, very overwhelming. So I would say that focusing on solutions, fine-tuning solutions, working on that is definitely essential. Otherwise, it can feel very existential, overwhelming. And I'm not a climate scientist, so I interact with just everyday visitors to the aquarium. So I think communicating those positives, communicating the necessary things, actions that we need to do is the way to go.
I like positive solutions. I think I would take the middle ground because I think it's kind of requires a mix. Whoa. Sorry. To get action, I think, and that was something that Meital and I think really kind of strived for in the book that we wrote. But I think like showing that there is a problem is really important, and what the problem is, and then how to fix the problem, so that you have that mix of empathy and hope, right? So, you know, these really horrible things happen. But, so, okay, we'll go to just wherever. So, a lot of animals get hit on the road. This mountain lions are facing an extinction vortex because they keep getting hit by cars on the road. It's horrible, but it's happening a lot. And people need to know that. But they can also know that we can build wildlife crossings that they'll use, and then they won't die as much. And so maybe they won't become extinct. And there's like an actionable item that we can do that we know works. And that gives a little bit of hope to be like, okay, we could help them. So we need to take action. And so I like the middle ground, because I worry that if we're only showing the positive stuff, people won't fully comprehend how bad it might be and why we actually need to help. But I think showing the positive solutions are really, really important.
If I could just pop in, you don't need to pass the microphone, but in your book, I really liked that you emphasized how the animal hit by the road ended up providing really important information and science that got incorporated. So like, you address the tragedy, but then show that out of the tragedy, we're learning, we're taking action from that. So it's almost like a conversion, sort of taking the negative and transforming it.
This is so good, thank you. It's all very inspirational. And I also was realizing in the interests of like acknowledging difficult things. I have a bit of a cough, and I just wanted to let you know it's with a fun post-infectious cough. So I'm not gonna get anybody sick, but I am just like freaking everybody out. So I thought I should tell everybody it's not infectious. It's like 4 weeks past infectious. And I have the hope that tomorrow when I go to the doctor, they'll tell me something I can do to get rid of it. Yay. But I love all of this. I love that there's, I love the questions, and this one in particular, and the different responses to it. And I realized it was linking back to my thoughts on the hope question, actually, because there's so many people now in this area, in this sort of overlap that you guys brought us together in artists and scientists and science writers and journalists and public people who work with the public, people who work with the animals. And I think that's part of what's so crucial, because we're all bringing our own sensibilities to it in a way. And so like, for example, I'm constitutionally incapable of writing a doom and gloom story. I'm just like a deeply optimistic person at heart, and I couldn't do it. And so without even thinking about it, everything that I write is infused with hope. It's infused with my positive vision of what's possible for the future. Knowing what I have learned about baby animals, and that some of them are very vulnerable to climate change, but many of them are also very resilient in ways that adults aren't, and I just can't help emphasizing that and feeling hopeful. But I think it's also really important that there are people working in this space who are sort of drawn to really highlighting how difficult things are in many places and how big the problem is, because that's important for people who otherwise wouldn't even know, why is this problem so big, why are so many people working on it. So I think that's what I'm really grateful for. I think that there's so many of us, and more all the time, who are bringing our sensibilities and different balances of optimism and realism, if you want, or pessimism, however you want to think about it.
I like the way you tied that back to the question about the connection between empathy and hope, because I think for me, when I think about this, I feel like I actually get more empathy from the stories that are maybe more serious and scarier and are trying to lay bare the facts of what is happening. And I get more hope from the stories that are focused on solutions. And I feel like you do need both to make change. Unless there are any other thoughts about that question, I'm going to open it up to everyone here. Yes.
Okay, so this brings me to, hi, I'm Gordon, I should say. Brings me to thinking about this in a really weird way. And I just came from a juggling festival. And I've been working on a long time to learn how to juggle 5 balls. And so I took 2 workshops. And what I learned from that was that, I would always try, I gotta keep going. And so they gave us trainings, workout trainings, and this one woman that's really good at it, she said, do your exercise for 5 minutes. The science proves that if you try to do it for 15 or 20, you lose focus, you just lose it all. So do an exercise for 5 minutes, then do another exercise for 5 minutes, then try 5 balls, and do that only for 5 minutes. And even if you get really close, and you think, oh, if I just keep going, no, just stop, walk away from it, but leave your 5 balls in the house where you'll walk by and do it. So my point is, I wonder, climate change, and we look at this, oh, it's 5 balls, and everybody says it's really hard for jugglers to do 5 balls. So climate change, it's really hard. What are the little exercises that we could focus on for 5 minutes to help with a big problem, and then every so often come back to the big problem? Oh yeah, that really helped that, or that didn't give us so much hope. But breaking it down so it doesn't seem like it's just so huge. And I go back to when my daughter asked me.
Yes, that's my dad.
if you could have a mundane superpower, what would it be? Not being invisible or whatever I'd say. Well, my power would be that any trash that I walked by, it would immediately fly back to the person that didn't dispose it. And it would stay on them until they put it in either the right recycling, and if it was like cigarette butts and they were already dead, all the butts would go to their grave and just pile up. So that was kind of like my little thing. But so how do you break it down so that there's little exercises, positive exercises that we can do towards the ultimate goal?
I think it raises a really important point, that in a problem as large as climate change that needs a solution, there are so many different ways to plug in, both in terms of how you do it. Some people might be comfortable going to a march. Some might not. Some might be comfortable writing to their local official or showing up at a city council meeting or county council or speaking at the State House. Others might not. I think all actions are valid and there's room for all actions. And I think it is really important to break a large problem down into smaller parts and think about small changes that we can all be making. At the same time, I think it's important to be aware that there's a long history of corporations, big polluting corporations, trying to shift responsibility from their shoulders onto us. The idea of a carbon footprint was invented by BP, one of the oil majors, to get people to be worried about reducing their carbon footprints rather than focusing on what BP is doing. Now, is it important that we all live in a way where we're conscious of what we're consuming and using? Of course it is. But I think it's also important that we, and to back up a step, I think that what you're getting at is if we all take small actions collectively, it amounts to change. I believe that. I think that's true. I think at the same time, we can't lose sight of the fact that there are much bigger fish to go after in this fight.
So it would be really great if for a lot of us, some of our small actions could include holding those players accountable, voting for politicians who hold them accountable. Yeah, and the first thing that Tiffany was saying, I feel like connected so well with what I was thinking about before. There's so many of us and we're so diverse. If we can find a way that our own passions or skill set or interests or hobbies, there's so many different things that we can do. So people who are already active volunteers at a school, for example, could do a little school cleanup day, or those who are interested in drawing or writing could volunteer to make a poster for a bar. You know, there's so many different ways that people can volunteer. That's great.
Something that I've been trying to do more lately is have conversations with people in my life who don't necessarily agree with a lot of the things that I think. People that maybe are a little older, aunts, uncles, grandparents, and try to convince them basically about some things that I think are really important. And that's a really small step that I can take by talking to people that I care about and that care about me, to see if maybe I can get them to care about the things that I care about.
How? Yeah, I was gonna say,
Exactly.
empathy is a big part of that.
Meital, which, not to put you on the spot, but give you an opportunity to jump in.
Meital, I don't know if you heard Sam, but he wanted to give you an opportunity to jump in if you have any thoughts.
I can't really hear you guys. I'm just over here. If you want to repeat the question, then I can take that.
Oh boy, you'd think that after 36 years I'd be better at summarizing my dad, but what we have been talking about broadly is the importance of taking a problem as large as climate change and breaking it down into smaller problems or smaller actions that we can all take.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I heard your bit about the carbon footprint was invented by BP, and that's something I remember learning about and being like, yeah, wait a second, you know, like this isn't all our fault as individuals. I think for me personally, like even having that knowledge of like, okay, like the biggest polluters are these giant corporations, and like even if I spend the rest of my life like, you know, radically changing it so I leave the smallest carbon footprint possible, like it, you know, like how much good will it do? I think for me personally, it's like figuring out what steps I can take that will make me feel better, like and have, you know, be lighter on my conscience so I can show up for, you know, these things and like feel like I'm, you know, doing enough as an individual that I have energy to show up as, you know, in my way personally, I think it's through art, like, but like making, like having the energy to make things that bring more awareness. And like I think I heard somebody say like holding these things, these companies accountable, and like just creating awareness of that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that was Danna who made that point about, you know, that can be a small action. And I think as we've been talking about today, art is a really powerful way to reach people and to reach people who might not be reached otherwise, might think that they don't care about this. Or to put it differently, have just not found a way in yet to caring about it. Other questions from the audience? Artie?
I'm just curious, when Gordon talked about the superpower, made me think of something I read once that was saying like, what would a truly conscious city look like?
Mm-hmm.
And it was saying it wouldn't have a landfill, that the town square would be where all the trash went, so it's never out of sight, your own shadow. And that's where the center of consciousness is, like wrestling with your own accountability. And I feel like the idea of accountability seems so profound to me, but also so difficult. Like, it feels like on every level it is kind of a human tendency to have a landfill and not put the trash in the town center, you know, like personally in our families and our communities. And so I've been active in conservation for a long time, and I hear consistently like the most important thing to do is create accountability. That also seems to me like the most difficult thing to do. And I just feel curious just to hear people break that down. What do you think that means to create accountability, recognizing that that's like a difficult thing, kind of like asking someone to face their shadow, and that I imagine that any individual person at the head of BP or whatnot probably doesn't feel that much less helpless than I do about it all. because they're, you know, though they have the power they have, they're still all embedded in a system where to create change involves turning a much bigger ship than just the one they're steering. And so what's realistic when we talk about creating accountability that doesn't just kind of mean that we as citizens show up and maybe even irresponsibly express our anger and outrage in a way that like might get a load off our chest, but is going to be totally ineffective and motivating BP.
Yeah, so to try to just briefly summarize that for Meital and for anyone who might not have heard, Marty was asking about the, or talking about the difficulty of creating accountability and about sort of our tendency as humans to bury our trash in landfills rather than put it in the town square. But also the importance of accountability in really driving change, and Marty was curious to hear our thoughts on accountability and how to achieve that. Is that a fair summary, Marty?
Yeah, and just thinking as somebody who's studied nonviolent communication for a long time, like what does creating accountability mean if you take out the idea that it's just expressing blame? It's a hard question.
Yeah, what does creating accountability mean if you take out the idea that it's just expressing blame? Answering this question might be the hardest thing you do today, so it's all easier from here.
Danna was giving me a stare down, so I can try to answer this.
It's very relevant here.
It's true. Yes, so that is something that through the work I do, we are always thinking about how to hold entities accountable. And as I mentioned earlier, one thing we do a lot is file lawsuits. And I think it's hard because it's set up in this really not super clear infrastructure that not everyone has access to, right? It's very hard for the public to engage on holding a corporation accountable for their greenhouse gas emissions and their fossil fuel use. But what I have learned over time in the work that I do at the center, I've been there about 5 years now, and I think what I've learned is we just go for it, because we know we're right, and we know the corporation is profiting a ridiculous amount at the cost of so many people's lives and well-being, presently and in the future. And I think what helps a lot, even though I'm often working with attorneys, and so we're often highly specialized in the weird knowledge that we know about the laws and the science, but when we have the public behind us, it can make such a big difference. I've been to hearings where we'll go and we'll make our argument and as to why this development shouldn't be built, how many greenhouse gas emissions are going to be from chopping down all these oak woodlands and bulldozing these grasslands, and how many more cars you're going to be putting on the road. And when we have people who are part of the public that either live nearby or just feel really strongly about it, they're expressing their concerns, expressing why they're worried that the climate change is real, it's here, and we need to start doing things differently. I was really surprised, but I've actually seen changes in the decision makers' minds, right? So people who are voting for whatever is being proposed, and I've seen them go from well, we can't do anything about it because they follow the law and they're doing everything right. And we're here, and we're there saying, it doesn't matter that you're following the law. One, we don't think you are. But even if you are, those laws were written so long ago. Look at all these people here. Look at all the science that we've shown you.